unfortunately for us and the Hindu community, the jihadis and the Christians and every other group that wants to persecute Hindus comes up with novel and innovative ways of persecuting us almost on a regular basis. Islam is more aggressive in nature compared to Christianity. Christianity moves by stealth. And therefore, a lot of these cases of predatory proselytization, where villages on end are converted, it comes from Christianity towards Hinduism.
We should be opening helplines, 1-800 helplines in every damn city in India, that here is our helpline. Should you want to convert to Hinduism, please. Here are two people, here is an organization, here is a lawyer team. We are setting it all up. Please come, we'll tell you how to convert. We need to be running Google ads on doing this. And okay, we have to be openly expansionist. Namaste, I'm Rahul Devan. I am, for those of you who don't know, I'm the founder of Sangam Talks, and we are here for listening to the Hindu Fund presentation. I founded the Hindu Fund, or the Hindu Network Foundation. So just some background setting. I'm going to read out these beautiful lines, from Osho's writings in a book called India My Love. Of course, this is Hindi. So he says, भारत केवल कोई भूखंड नहीं है, न ही कोई राजनीतिक इकाई, न ऐतिहासिक तथ्यों का कोई टुकड़ा, न धन, न पद, न प्रतिष्ठा की पागल दौड़ है. भारत एक अभीप्सा है, एक प्यास सत्य को पा लेने की. A little translation in English would be that India is not only a geographic entity, a political entity. It is not a bunch of history. It is neither a race for power and prestige and whatever else. It is a thirst, it is a search for truth. I really, really love these lines, and it actually tells us a lot about why India is called a sacred geography. And what makes it this sacred geography is Hinduism, and emanating from it all Indian born religions, philosophies, all our darshanas, and so on and so forth. But I had asked in 2017, I had asked this question to Justice Keher, who had just retired as the Chief Justice of India. And I asked him after his lecture on secularism and how India must walk this, because we've chosen this as a path. I asked him if 80% Indians become Muslims, would India remain? Which in other words is that the values that you see that Hindus demonstrate in India, would Muslims demonstrate the same values? He beat around the bush. Obviously, then I asked a couple of more probing questions around the 57 Islamic countries, whether they demonstrate the same values. Obviously, he did have to accept that India won't probably remain, or not in its current form and shape, certainly not its values. I want to talk about the challenge in front of us, the challenges in front of us, and I like to put it like this: that we are in asymmetric war of war on India and Hinduism specifically. And I want to talk about Islam first, and let's actually exit from here and listen to this wonderful man in video.
Yes, sir, आ रही है आवाज. Independent of this secularism, Islamization of knowledge. So we want to Islamize all sciences, whether it's biology or physics or medical science, and then you go to community and then society and to country. And that's how the entire nation is reformed. First move that I will do, I will abolish the constitution and I will establish the only logical and rational constitution, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That will be my first move.
So I really like this man. He's actually from Deoband, if I'm not wrong, and he moved to Chicago a decade ago or so. I had tried to argue with this man and teach him some values when I was quite naive a decade back on how all of these things are irrational, and tried to argue with him how mutual respect is the only answer, and so on and so forth. And I was pretty stupid to try and even discuss that with him. He's obviously added, he's called Yasir Nadeem. Now he added Al Wajidi in trying to become an Arab, as opposed to finding his roots in India. what he's saying is absolutely in line with the Popular Front of India. Members of, which organization, of that organization, about 12 members were charge sheeted on 18th May 2023, as you can see here. And they had this whole paper. This is a public document, it's publicly available. We'll actually try and upload this on Saryu Trust's website as well. But it actually calls out, how by 2047, India has to become an Islamic nation, and how they plan to infiltrate the army, police, judiciary, IAS, and so on and so forth. We all know Islamic law cannot be changed, and I believe we are heading towards a civil war, and perhaps another partition if we continue to go on like this on the current trajectory. We keep crying about how there is demographic change. There was a recent tweet from Chief Minister Hemant Biswa Sarma on somebody said something to him from the Congress, and his tweet said that I'm not going to go down without a fight, and Hinduism is not going to go down without a fight. That was a pretty sad state of he's fighting. And I think just last night I saw a tweet from him again that by 2041 Assam will be 50-50 in Hindu and Muslim population. When we started, it was 3% Muslim, which was perhaps native to Assam, is what he said. So I mean, even among the top politicians in the country, there is a grave there is a sense of in clarity, what do we do with this situation? Let's look at some Christianity and what they're doing. This is a Joshua project. A lot of you may already know about this. This is an aggregation of all church organizations globally, a very large number of them, and they've actually mapped which parts of the world are unreached, and where do they need to plant churches so that they can soul harvest. And India, as you see, is one of the largely unreached populations of the world, where there is massive effort. They've mapped down to the last 35,000 people and 20,000 people who speak a certain language in a certain region in India, and so on and so forth. They've done that. They actually have Bible in 1400 languages, in listening, dialects, all of them. So they've done a tremendous job. All of this to obviously Christianize India. I asked Grok, what's the estimated Christian population in Punjab, and it said 10 to 15%. And sadly, 23% in Amritsar, where, the land of Harmandir Sahib, and 23% is now Christian population. So turban wearing, hallelujah singing Sikh Christians is not an uncommon sight in Punjab these days. Here is a man you may know. Rahul Gandhi actually sat with him post this incident, which I'll just share in just a moment, where he was being lectured on. Rahul Gandhi, there's a video on the Bharat Jodo Yatra, where he asks this man, Father George Punaya, that is Jesus God, and he was saying he's the Son of God and he's the only true God, and so on and so forth. This man, a year before the Bharat Jodo Yatra, in a public gathering in Kanyakumari, had said we wear shoes because the impurities of Bharat Mata should not touch us, should not contaminate us. We all know that our temples are not in our control. So I'm just sort of taking you to both the Islamic threat, the Christian threat, and of course what the secular state does to us, and so on and so forth. There's a global mafia. There are global threats. The $3 trillion halal mafia. And as you may know, all the meat that you eat in India, barring perhaps states like Jharkhand and Bihar, pretty much everything is halal. All the goat meat, all the chicken, everything is controlled. All the growers are all Hindu, but the transport and the end shops is all controlled by Muslims, and all of that goes into zakat and eventually funds jihad and whatever else. So while they're looking at 2047 converting India into an Islamic nation, we are saying Viksit Bharat. Along with that, we pretty much don't know what we are after. So my question is that in 2047, will the stone pelting on Ram Navami Shobha Yatras be a thing of the past? Will it stop? Will Christian soul harvesting stop? Will we have a fast and fair delivery of justice? Will we have a fearless society where if criticism of Ram and questioning his character is kosher, then will that be the case for Muhammad as well? Or is that still going to be dealt with Sartan se juda? My view of an India is a nation state that protects, preserves, promotes, and its indigenous religions, traditions, cultures, and values. That would be what I would call a Hindu Rajya. There are, I am personally after two goals. One is to make Hinduism missionary again, and the other is to create 1,000 crore Hindu fund. The first one is largely about being Vistarvadi, so that we must become missionary again. I'm not going to delve into this. There is a talk on Sangam Talks, a full talk on this topic, actually a couple of them, where I delve deeper into this issue. And there are one or two more coming in the next month or so. But we are here to talk about the 1,000 crore Hindu fund. And what am I after? Basically, build the entire Hindu ecosystem to fund it. Our biggest problem right now is that there are many people fighting, and I'll just go over a few cases. Also, Nupur Sharma is here. Nupurji was going to talk about how she set up a Hindu phobia tracker and perhaps other projects. You already know about her and Rahul Roshan's work with Op India. But the point is that everybody in the ecosystem is struggling for funds. This is the single biggest constraint that Hindus and Hindu organizations have at this point, and they've had it for years. And so that's what I'm after trying to solve. And I have two operating principles: make liberal grants, don't ask 1,000 questions on propriety, and trust by default and evaluate over time. Did the grantee, did the receiver of the grants, ride a BMW and go for a foreign holiday using our donation money? Let's worry about that when we've made grants and when we found evidence of default, instead of looking at everybody with eyes of suspicion and then figuring out whether we should or no. So I want to reverse that whole paradigm of thinking, right? That's how I operate with my own money. And that's actually how I want this organization to build. I'm here trying to build an institution and not make it a one-man show, which is me. It starts with an individual, but it has to become an institution beyond the individual. That's what I'm trying to do here. Already explained some of this. Just wanted to bring up a few cases. Neeraj Atri started his channel in 2017 and has been talking about Islam, calling out Islam at grave personal risk. There are people like ex-Muslim Sahil, once again, grave personal risk, thrown out of his family, had to move cities, live away for many years, till he has recently been reunited. Just I asked in one of my interviews, there were 4-5 ex-Muslims, very popular talk on Sangam Talks. And I asked these people that, it's one thing to say, okay, you've left Islam, but why try and convert everybody and say that, we want you to leave Islam as well? There is so much threat and so much sacrifice you have to make for that. Why do this? And the consistent answer has been that Islam makes us hate our people, Hindu brothers around. And as we see them, we have no problems living with them. It's actually wonderful living with Hindus around us. And worse, they said that it actually makes us hate India. So it was a very pleasant comment to hear that, the red line was that if you make us hate India, sorry, that's it. And now we are also going to pull the others out of this mess. So there's of course people like Vishnu Shankar Jain, Hari Shankar Jain, absolutely adarniya for us. What they've done for Hindu temples, for Kashi Vishwanath, stopped the wuzu in the Shivling, in the Gyanvapi Masjid, and many other cases. Sambhal Masjid or temple has been reopened. It's under investigation and in court and so on and so forth. So just brilliant work. I'd asked Vishnu Bhai how many cases father and son have fought since 1989, if I recall correctly, over 180 cases. Then I asked him that, if you were to put a price to the last few cases that you fought in the last, say, 5 years or something, okay, and, just put a normal price tag that you would charge, any reasonable price tag, not the Kapil Sibal type price tag, but any reasonable price tag you would charge. You know what the amount was 23 crores, which all of that work they've done free, out of their own pocket, out of their own, at sacrificing their own practice time, which they could have used to build their large practice. That's very similar story with Ravi Ranjan ji. He quit his job and business eventually, and many years back, 10-15 years back, to change the consciousness of the larger Hindu society, including the Sikhs and everybody, on how they need to eat jhatka and not to deny the halal economy. Mohit Bhardwaj, another great example, building a Gurukul in North India. There is a shakha of the Rig Veda, which was sort of prescribed for North India. That's how I understand it. And that's called the Shakhyayan Shakha. And there are only 2 living acharyas left in the country, both in their mid 70s. And he and his friend Abhijit actually learnt while they were doing their engineering in Pune. And then both of them decided to revive this Shakha, and Mohit is building a Gurukul. Abhijit is doing this independently, teaching kids at his own home, and so on and so forth. We've had a huge role in funding both of them from the Hindu Fund. Acharya Manoj, he's brought back, over 5,000, 6,000 girls lost to Islam. These 3 people here have met about 30 girls and boys at the ashram in Kerala. And this is the true Kerala story. आपका भगवान सूंड वाला कैसे हो सकता है? How can he have a trunk? Your God could not save his own wife. So these are the kind of questions Vaishali would face while she was working at TCS in Thiruvananthapuram. And over 2 years they targeted her and converted her. Then after 2 or 3 years of living as a Muslim, she eventually, her parents took her to Acharya Manoj, who argued with her and got her back, and so on and so forth. A lot of them, 30-40 of them, are now full-time pracharaks, and they're actually a missionary Hindu organization, one of its only kind that I know of in the country. So there are these people, right, brilliant people who are working, and and we've funded about over 90, 100 such people, organizations over the last 10 years, 9 years or so. What are my current priorities that I'm working on? I'm trying to build a legal fund, and just a few examples here. We are challenging the interpretation of the Article 26. This case is in the Madras High Court. I can't talk too much, but a notice, you can look at T.R. Ramesh's tweet referring to this case of, and he's tagged Saryu Trust and me. So you may want to look at that. If we progress in this case, the 3 areas that will be affected completely, this actually asks for outright termination of HR&CE. And there's a notice that's been issued to the Tamil Nadu government on why it should not be scrapped. This case is being fought by us, Saryu Trust actually, but sort of attributed to the Hindu Fund, if you like. The Sabrimala temple issue will be addressed, which is an interpretation of the word denomination of the constitution. The ambiguity around the word minority, all of this may get impacted. We are going to shortly challenge the FCRA. There is, both the publishing of data since 21 or 23 has stopped. The government has stopped publishing FCRA data on its website. And that is one point, and the other is we want to go outright go for SCRA ban to cut out funding. This is an old Hindu charter demand which we never progressed on, so we want to pick this up again, and we are doing that with Vishnu Shankar Jain. And then of course his cases, a lot of these cases that he's fighting on his own, we now have a list of 10 more cases that we want to fight with him. Other than him, we are working with lawyers in Mumbai High Court, in Chennai High Court, on all sorts of Hindu cases. And so I really want to build a corpus other than funding specific key projects. The other big ticket that I'm looking at is to fund for manuscripts and inscriptions. Just a sneak peek into our state. In 1909, if I recall correctly, the Epigraphica Indica and Karnataka were published by the British. And since then, just search for Epigraphica Indica. Just Google for it right now, perhaps as I speak. You will find archive.org, you will find IGNCA, and you will find bjp.org. All of them have PDFs scanned. There is not a single digitized version of the Epigraphica Indica where you could search, you could look at you could search on inscriptions based on various kinds of meta information, for example, the king, the time period, or any of that. It's not searchable. One of the most talked about ancient text is the Arthashastra. Believe it or not, the Arthashastra does not have a digital version even now. So other than scanning and things like that, a lot of which is being done by largely two organizations, eGangotri and eSahitya. Both of them are supported by the Hindu Fund in fair manner. Other than that, we are actually also supporting projects in digitization. So we are looking at the Nilakanthiya Mahabharata, the critical edition currently being translated from, it's in Sanskrit but written in Bangla script, so it's being sort of typed out in Devanagari and then being made searchable with audio shlokas and so on and so forth. All of these projects are sort of going on, and I'm trying to desperately raise money for these. The 5 crore and 2 crore is actually very small amounts. I mean, we need a lot more. They may not be small amounts, but we need a lot more. But this is just a starting out number that I've put out there. I just want to call out that I'm not the only one. I actually collect money in their names. So if I screw up, it's their names that I put a bad name to, if you like. There is the sort of Mohandas Pai family. Me and Colonel Ramakrishna are from Saryu Trust. Anand Prasad is top 50 lawyers in the country. He was a co-founder of India's largest legal firm called Trilegal. Of course, he exited, has his own firm now. Rajiv Malhotra is a co-author in many books, and she's the, if you like, the Uttaradhikari, as Rajiv ji announced at the Infinity Foundation's 30th year event in the US, that she's going to take over Infinity Foundation from him. Ram Swaroop is a top coach, Marshall Goldsmith coach and an entrepreneur. There's a very well decorated Indian Army officer, Major General Arvind Bhatia. There's Swami Veda Tattvananda from Ramakrishna Mission. Swamiji used to be the person who would train all the sannyasis getting inducted into Ramakrishna Mission. So he was really a big deal. Sudarshan is a researcher and a scholar on history of ancient Indian science. He works with doing his PhD along with Professor R.N. Iyengar at Jain University, and a top scholar on epigraphy and inscription and manuscripts. Largely focuses on inscriptions, and he's actually taken assignments in Indonesia for Buddhist manuscripts and so on and so forth. So there's a good bunch of people. I will be adding 2 or 3 more names to this as we go along. So a bit of history quickly before I hand over to Nupur. This number is a lot higher now. We have about over 110 organizations and individuals and about 150 projects. This number is also a lot more because there is some numbers we can't share publicly and so on and so forth, but roughly around 14 crores over the last 9 years has been given out as third-party funding. This is other than the Sangam Talks and Saryu Trust and all of that money that I've spent from my own resources. I used to take out 7% of my profits from my business. I used to run a software business from 2002 to 2022. I sold my business, and post the exit, I fund it all through my personal funds. This is Saryu Trust. I don't ask for a single rupee for all that I do inside. We get some small donations via people donating for Sangam talks in India and US and so on and so forth. This is not even 1 or 2% of what we spend on the whole Saryu Trust. We get some income, small income from YouTube. I mean, it probably just adds up to 5% of what I spend. I don't ask for money for all of this. What I'm asking for money is for all the third-party funding, which I had been doing. And what I did last year in May was that I founded the Hindu Network Foundation along with a few people. And this is what I call the Hindu Fund, if you like. So this is a Section 8 company. So I'm attributing all that Saryu has done since 2016 to the Hindu Network Foundation. Attributing. So this money didn't go out from HNF, it went from Saryu. Only since June 2024, the money has been going from from HNF or the Hindu Fund to the third parties. I hope that's clear. Before I end, and I'll take questions at the end, I want to remind the people here that without money, no dharma can be protected. धर्म का मूल अर्थ है, धर्मस्य मूलम अर्थः. I will escape and actually show you give you a sneak peek into how do you know if you do choose to give out your money, where will it go? So this is our work. All the grants that have been given out, we update at the end of every month. Is updated here. So you could potentially call Upward Foundation, which is Ashish Dhar, for example, that did he receive this money? Okay, you could, Nupur is here, but you could potentially go to, yeah, okay, there it is. So search on Gavishti and you could actually check with Nupur or Rahul, did they receive this money for Gavishti, for example? Okay, so it's transparent. We've tried to make all the grants that we make transparent so that you know where the money is going. Where it is coming from, largely, I mean, the collections are very small at this point in time. It's largely coming through my own resources. But we will be publishing some of that also on the website as we go along. What we are doing now is that, finding money like the 5 crore for the legal fund and so on and so forth. That is a corpus I do want to build. But the feedback that I'd been getting is that instead of these, giving out these vague abstract numbers that you're building a corpus for, why don't you try and get funding done for specific projects? So that's also what we're starting now. So we've just launched this. For example, this is the Neelakanthia Mahabharat project, and this is 1.08 crores, and we've given about 42 lakhs. So if you go inside, you could, so sorry about that. Yeah, I don't want to donate, but go inside the project and you could actually donate a specific amount or any amount and then donate. The money we've given for this specific project over the years is listed, and so everything's as transparent as it could be, and that's how I'm hoping to run this organization and continue to do that going forward. So I'm going to stop here and hand over to Nupur to talk about Hindu Phobia Tracker. So we've only had over 50 people twice in the last 6 months of me doing this every 2 weeks. So Nupur, I guess we'll have to advertise all this based on you every time you show up along with just kidding.
My pleasure entirely, Rahulji.
Okay, yeah. Over to you, Nupur, for about 30 minutes to speak about Gavishti and Hindu Phobia Tracker.
Great. Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you to Rahulji and the Hindu Fund and Saryu and everybody involved with Rahulji. I think without his support, Hindu Phobia Tracker would not have sustained, and we would not have been able to do whatever we are doing so far or hope to do more in the future. He supported us from the very beginning, and we will forever be in deep gratitude of Rahulji. So I would like to start with why we thought we should be coming up with something like the Hinduphobia tracker. Um, Rahul Roshan and I, we were thinking of building a database, a Hinduphobia tracker, for a very, very long time. In fact, for 4.5 years at least. But we never had the time and we never had the resources, unfortunately. But a couple of years ago, in 2024, January, in fact, I had the opportunity to visit Israel right at the start of the war. So the war started, the Hamas attack was on 7th October, and I traveled to Israel in Jan 2024. And when I went there, I happened to also visit one of the Holocaust museums. And there was an entire room which had large journals, books. And in those books, they had meticulously written down the name of victims. They had written down how they had died or how they had escaped and what exactly had happened to them during the Holocaust. And this was a large book. It was very neatly documented. They had managed to track down millions of Jewish individuals who were persecuted during the Holocaust. And that, I feel, it hit me like a ton of bricks. These black journals in the background, I took this in panoramic view. These black journals in the background were all filled with names of Jewish victims, their contact, what happened to them, how they were persecuted, how they died, or how they survived, and where they escaped. Hundreds and hundreds of journals with millions of names. And on top, there was this dome where they had pictures of many of the victims of the Holocaust. And this ended up hitting me like a ton of bricks because unfortunately, we don't have documentation of Hindu victims at all. And this, while we've been persecuted for generations, for hundreds of years. When I was researching the Malabar genocide of Hindus, I came across two books which basically, one after the other, merely documented government communication from 100 years before the actual Malabar genocide of Hindus. So that happened in 1921, and this had communication from about the beginning of 1800s. And on a very regular basis, there were specific religious attacks against Hindus. And the government communique had documented those instances. Most of them didn't have names of individuals, but they did have the instances. So one of the first government communique was about a Nayar youth whose shikha was chopped off and he was stabbed with a knife repeatedly by a Mopla Muslim. These government communications and these cases have been lost forever, something that the Jews have managed to document so effectively. We have failed, unfortunately, thoroughly at documenting our victims. And that made me believe that perhaps our victimhood is not taken seriously because we have nothing to show for it. It is very easy for politicians to say that the Malabar genocide of Hindus was a peasant uprising because we don't have documentation of the Hindu victims who were persecuted and who were murdered and who were raped and who were attacked specifically for being Hindu, specifically for their religious identity. We've coined a term called love jihad, not we in the sense the Hindu community, not us at Hinduphobia, but we know the term love jihad. But do we have documented as to what the contours of that crime is? What makes a crime a love jihad? What is the definition of love jihad? The Jews have done it brilliantly. They've defined anti-Semitism to the T. We so far had been unable or unsuccessful in not just defining Hinduphobia or the various kinds of crimes within Hinduphobia, but also popularizing it. So after visiting Israel, the dream or the project that Rahul Roshan and I wanted to work on for a very, very long time became almost a pressing need. So we urgently started working on the database. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the database turned out to be more complex than we had imagined. We didn't realize the kind of parameters that we would have to deal with because, unfortunately for us and the Hindu community, the jihadis and the Christians and every other group that wants to persecute Hindus comes up with novel and innovative ways of persecuting us almost on a regular basis. So dividing those crimes into categories and subcategories was an absolute headache, and defining those categories was worse. But we did come up with our own working definitions of Hindu phobia and of the various categories of crimes that we believe encompass mostly, more or less, all the ways in which Hindus are persecuted. So we have divided the Hindu phobia tracker into various categories and subcategories depending on how we believe Hindus are persecuted. I'm going to go through all the categories briefly and then explain how we reached these conclusions and what the definition of Hindu phobia entails. We have done away with the phrase love jihad completely for the website, because crimes that come under the category of love jihad aren't necessarily only about getting into relationships, but there are a lot of elements of grooming involved where minor girls are misled into these so-called relationships, or they are sexually abused and assaulted for the specific purpose of conversion. Therefore, we've named it crimes against women in relationships and other sexual crimes. So we've done away with the term love jihad almost entirely. The next category is hate speech against Hindus. This is fairly self-explanatory. It's hate speech where any of our festivals, our symbols of faith, our culture, our scriptures are abused or twisted. We've included crimes where perpetrators are mislabeled as Hindus when they're actually Muslims or belonging to any other faith. The next is men attacked for being associated with non-Hindu women. This is a fairly common category of crime, and increasingly so over the months and years. Men are being attacked simply for being associated with Muslim women very often. There is a conspiracy theory that the Muslims have come up with. It's called Bhagwa love trap. Under that, a lot of men who are merely seen with Muslim women, they could be giving a lift to a student if they're a professor. They could be giving a lift to a colleague from office. They could just be college friends who are grabbing an ice cream together. A Muslim mob finds them and they beat up the Hindu youth. There have been cases where Muslim women have also been abused terribly. In one of these cases, a Muslim woman was actually abducted and gang raped because she was seen with a Hindu youth. For the purpose of Hindu phobia tracker, we count only the Hindu men as victims, not the Muslim women, because after all, it is a Hindu phobia tracker and our victims are exclusively Hindus and not Muslims or belonging to any other faith. The other is predatory proselytization. Predatory proselytization essentially is conversion by means of inducement, coercion, harassment, bribery, brainwashing, etc. In predatory proselytization, most of the cases that we actually end up documenting come from the Christian faith towards Hindus. Islam is more aggressive in nature compared to Christianity. Christianity moves by stealth. And therefore, a lot of these cases of predatory proselytization, where villages on end are converted, it comes from Christianity towards Hinduism. The other is attack resulting in death. In this, we have several subcategories where we define what kind of an attack leading to death is considered Hindu phobia. In this, we have mob violence, we have communal violence, attack on festivals, temples, so on and so forth. Attack to induce migration is one of the categories, because we see in a lot of cases that a mob attacks the handful of Hindu residents of an area which is Muslim dominated simply to affect migration. And the attack can be triggered by very trivial reasons or triggers. So I'll again go back to the Hauz Qazi case, which is a classic case in my book. There's an area in Delhi called Hauz Qazi, in that it's a Muslim dominated area. There's a very small lane in which handful of Hindu families live. They were attacked supposedly over a parking issue. But then during the attack, their temple was desecrated. A Muslim man even urinated on the idols. The Hindus were attacked with weapons. guns, swords, knives, so on and so forth. When we went to the ground, we were told by the Hindus that they basically want us to run away from this area so that the entire area can be Muslim dominated. So while each specific method used in that attack would come in different subcategories, one of the categories that would feature in would be attack to induce migration from an area. The next is attack not resulting in death. So it's similar subcategories, but we document cases which does not result in the death of Hindus. The next is restriction or ban on Hindu practices. In this, there are certain subcategories where we consider, say, a Muslim population of an area stopping Hindus from practicing their faith. But in this category, we also count the administration and state as perpetrators, or any authority figure like school principals or school admin, so on and so forth, when they stop Hindus from following their faith and carrying out their practices, religious practices. A good example would be the recent case in which there was an FIR against 3 Muslims who went inside a temple and started distributing Islamic pamphlets and preaching Islam. The court held that this was not for the purpose of conversion, and it is not a crime to preach Islam inside of a temple. And the 3 FIRs against the 3 Muslim men were quashed by the Karnataka High Court. When we read the FIR and judgment, it turns out that the Muslim men who had entered the temple were actually threatening Hindus that if they don't convert to Islam, they will face hellfire. They were saying that the only word which is true as far as faith is concerned is that of Islam and that of Muhammad. They were saying that their Hindu gods and goddesses are kafir gods and goddesses, and Hindus are kafirs, and that their aim was to convert the entire world into Islam. And if Hindus don't concede, they would be killed. All of this was said inside a temple, and the Karnataka High Court, in its infinite wisdom, decided that this was not a case of conversion or attempted conversion and quashed the FIRs. That case, we have made 2 entries in the Hindu phobia tracker. One is, of course, the Muslim men desecrating the temple and indulging in predatory proselytization. That's one, because that's one crime. And the other crime, the Hindu phobic crime that we've documented, is the court quashing the FIR and saying that this is not an affront to the Hindu faith, because we believe the order in itself is Hindu phobic and diminishes the rights of Hindus. So the Hindu phobia tracker not only considers forces which are antithetical to Hindus, for example, Islamists, Muslims, Christians, in certain cases, Ambedkarites in certain parts of the world. There are Khalistanis, there are white supremacists who attack Hindus for their faith. But we also consider the state and the judiciary as perpetrators when such cases arise. For example, West Bengal government disallowing a Durga Puja immersion procession because there is a Muharram procession which is going on simultaneously. That would be clocked as an Hindu phobic attempt by the state. And the last category that we have is attack on Hindu religious representations. This could be the desecration of an image of our gods and goddesses, desecration of the temple itself, because the temple is a representation of the Hindu faith. There are certain cases in which Muslims, for example, wipe off the bindi of a Hindu married woman's head. That would be a religious representation. Wiping off the sindoor would be a religious representation. In Diwali, if there is your puja which is set up and somebody kicks the puja setup that a Hindu has put up for him for his worship, that would be an attack on Hindu representations. So we have divided all of these crimes against Hindus in these various categories. Each category and each subcategory comes with its own academic definition. So when you go down, the entire category has been academically defined. We have used current Indian laws, we have used Supreme Court and High Court judgments, and we have also actually used the UN Charter to define why these crimes are specifically hate crimes and should be branded as such. So, in this, if you notice, we have also used the UN Charter to define why women being targeted for their faith is should be considered a hate crime, not just a crime. Now, the question that I often get is what's the point of defining it academically? Because a lot of people may or may not understand what we're talking about. I believe that everything that Hindus go through has to be defined academically and in the vocabulary that we can communicate to the world audience, because there are specific kinds of crimes that somebody sitting in the US might not particularly understand why it's a crime for the Hindu community. If I talk about the swastika, Rahul Diwanji mentioned it in his presentation as well, that reclaiming of the swastika is actually one of his goals with the Hindu Fund. If today I say that the desecration of a swastika is a Hindu phobic crime for the Hindu community, there are several groups across the world who would not understand the significance of a swastika. And that has to in turn be academically defined as to why the swastika is important and why an attack on any religious symbol of the Hindu faith is a Hindu phobic crime. Now, that religious symbol may not hold any value for somebody who's not a practicing Hindu, but it does hold significance to practicing Hindu and the Hindu faith. Now, why it's also important to document these things is because if there is, for example, a Khalistani attack on a temple in the US or Australia, they write Modi go back on the wall of a temple in Australia. Now, the general argument that we get is, oh, this is a political attack. That's first, right? That the attack is due to politics and not due to religion. Second, that Khalistan as an ideology in itself is a political extremist ideology, and any attack on any Indian, quote unquote, is for political purposes and not for religious purposes. Now, when we start defining these things academically, what we've done is we've said that any attack on a perceived Indian, and I say perceived because that person might not be Indian passport holder, he might just be somebody of Indian origin. But any attack by a Khalistani against an Indian or a perceived Indian would be considered Hindu phobic because Khalistan as an ideology views India as a Hindu collectivity. And the moment Khalistanis view India as a Hindu collectivity, because that's their entire argument that Sikhism is separate from Hindu identity and therefore they deserve a separate state called Khalistan, which is unique from India, which has a Hindu identity. They are attacking an Indian not because of the political boundaries of India. They're attacking an Indian because they believe India is a Hindu collectivity with Hindu roots and it is a Hindu civilization state. And therefore, they hold animosity towards Indian. Now, this argument, we need the vocabulary to describe why we think a Khalistani attack is an attack driven by Hindu phobia and not just driven by political identity or political ideology. When you write go back Modi on a temple wall, we know it's Hinduphobic in our heart. We feel it. We feel the animosity. We feel the religious hate. But we need the vocabulary to say that the temple in and of itself is a religious symbol and therefore any desecration of the temple is a Hinduphobic attack. Why do they not write go back Modi on a church wall? Why do they not write go back Modi on a mosque wall? They don't, because they view India as a Hindu collectivity and therefore desecration of the Indian flag and desecration of the temple is one and the same for them. Both are driven by Hindu phobia. So if a Khalistani desecrates an Indian flag, it is also Hindu phobic because they view the flag as the representation of a nation which is a Hindu collectivity. And therefore, it becomes important to put these in academic phrases, to put these in academic definitions, so that we can explain to the world why any attack is Hinduphobic. The argument of India being a Hindu collectivity, I will be transparent, actually comes from the Jewish definition of anti-Semitism. The Jews do believe that any attack, for example, by a Palestinian on the state of Israel is an anti-Semitic attack, because the state of Israel in and of itself is a Jewish collectivity, and therefore when you attack Israel, your motive is anti-Semitic, which is anti-Jew, which is driven in turn by religious motives. So we need to pull in research from various parts of the world of indigenous tribes that have faced faced a religious onslaught by antithetical religious forces, and define our own persecution. It breaks my heart that we've been unable to do so far, but I also believe that we were fighting on so many fronts that it was difficult for anybody to genuinely sit and think of how we can divide all the persecution that we face in several categories and subcategories and give it a specific definition. The aim of the Hinduphobia tracker right now is, of course, to document hate crimes. If we could go to the hate crime database, if you can just scroll down, if we click on any of these cases, we can just take the first case, for example, any case. If we open any case, we'll have, of course, the date of incident, the location, it has been assigned a case ID. All of that information would be up front. If we scroll down, we can see the categories and subcategories that we've divided and put this case in. If we scroll further, there'll be a case summary, which is basically what are the details of the case and what has happened in the case. But what we've also done, and why it takes us so long to document each case, is for each case, we have almost 3,000 hate crimes documented so far, only from 2024 1st Jan. For each case, we write an extremely detailed explanation as to why that particular crime is a hate crime. So we define why it's been put in different categories and subcategories. If we scroll further down, we explain why that specific case and the contours of that case fit in these categories and why we've documented it as a hate crime. Sometimes these explanations for certain complex cases can go up to 5,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 words. And we do that for each and every case that we document in Hinduphobia Tracker. So if there are almost 3,000 hate crimes that we've added so far to the database, each of those 3,000 crimes comes with its own essay as to why that specific crime is a hate crime. Lower, we have victim details. So we'll have total victims, whether that girl, the victim is a minor or an adult, women, men, which caste they belong to, senior citizen, age group, so on and so forth, whether the victim is deceased or not, what the case status is. If we go further down, we have perpetrator details. So who were the perpetrators? They were Muslim extremists. The perpetrator range, whether it was one person, if it was a mob of 5 to 10 people, 50 to 100 people, what was the gender of the perpetrator. We've given all our sources, and we have also given people the option to submit either additional information or raise a dispute. So if somebody believes that this case should not be reflected in the Hinduphobia tracker, we've given them the option to raise a dispute. When a dispute is raised, we evaluate that dispute. If we believe it's authentic and that case indeed should not be in Hinduphobia, maybe we've missed some details, maybe there's a court verdict, maybe more details have emerged later, we have a separate database where we show the removed cases. So far, we haven't removed any because the disputes haven't really come through. I'll talk about that next. People can also submit additional information. So there have been people who submitted FIRs, court documents, so that we can keep updating those cases with whatever the latest information is. This is how the hate crime database works. If we go to undecided cases now, these are cases where we are a little unsure whether we can academically define the religious motive of the crime. So the first case, the latest case, is severed heads of cows found in village well in Sultanpur, Uttar Pradesh. Now, in this case, we didn't have the details of the perpetrators. And while the slaughter of cows in and of itself can be considered Hindu-phobic, we don't have information to say for sure that the perpetrators were Muslims or whoever. We don't have information for sure that they did it for religious purposes. And therefore, we document these cases in the undecided case database. So they will not reflect as a hate crime, but we do have a separate database where we put such cases. I know that we are being extremely strict with the parameters that we apply. Cows rescued from Muslim smugglers, for example, it should very clear cut be a case of Hinduphobia. But we don't put it in Hinduphobia unless there is a specific religious marker to that crime. The only reason we do that is because we want the database to be as authentic as possible. We have no dearth of cases, unfortunately. There are tens of cases on a regular basis, and therefore we feel that keeping the parameters strict and keeping the database pure will help us in the future when we want to take it to the international community. For example, if there is a 20-year-old girl who, let's take a famous case, for example, if we take the case of Aftab Poonawala, that girl Shraddha Walkar, who was chopped into pieces by Aftab. Everybody said that it was a Hindu-phobic crime. Everybody believed it was a Hindu-phobic crime. Everybody termed it as love jihad. For the Hindu-phobia tracker, we actually put that case in undecided. We did not consider it a hate crime immediately. And that's for a few simple reasons. One, the girl was an adult. So, an adult woman has the agency to decide whether she wants to be in a relationship with a Muslim, Christian, Hindu, whoever. So, A, that was consensual. B, there was no evidence of forced conversion. Unfortunately, the victim is no longer alive, and dead victims tell no tales. Her parents made no such allegation either. And therefore, we had no evidence of forced religious conversion. We had no evidence of brainwashing from a direct kith or kin, or any marker by the victim herself, who was again dead victims tell no tales. And therefore we were pressed to find any specific religious marker in the case, even though in our hearts we know that the kind of brutality inflicted on Shraddha was probably because Aftab's faith ordains such brutality towards a kafir woman. But because we could find no specific religious marker, we put it in undecided because we don't want questions. And we are our biggest critics, and we play the devil's advocate, and we ask ourselves that if we had to debunk the Hinduphobia tracker and the hate crime database, how would we do it? So we pick up every case and ask ourselves, can somebody like, I don't know, pick any name from the liberal ecosystem? Can somebody like a Kapil Sibal, can somebody like a Rana Ayub or whoever ask me these set of questions, and do I have a legitimate answer for it? If we do, we put it in the hate crime database and explain why. If we don't, we put it in undecided. I'm just going to give one last example. The case of Lavanya. She was a minor who had ingested poison, and she passed away. Her dying declaration was that there was an attempt to convert her to Christianity, and which is why she is committing suicide. The court held that no, the police went to court and said that no, there is no authenticity to the dying declaration. Some Hindutva-vadis came to the hospital and brainwashed her. And when we added that case to the hate tracker, in fact, we even got a dispute for that case, the Lavanya case, saying that the court is not agreeing with your assessment and therefore it should not be in the hate crime tracker. We stuck to our guns and we wrote an explanation that no, according to every legal and international convention, a victim's dying declaration is considered the truth. And therefore, we are going to continue to add that case to the hate crime database, and we are not going to move it to undecided or the dispute deleted case database. So we continue to put Lavanya case in the database because The dying declaration was extremely clear, and everybody can make conjectures that she was brainwashed, she was asked to do it in the last moment, it was the haze of death because of which she made these statements. But for us at Hinduphobia Tracker, the victim of the statement is paramount, and the victim of the statement of the police and the court and everything comes secondary. There are many, many cases where the police has said that there was no communal angle, but we have added those cases to the hate crime database and explained that the no communal angle trope by the police happens because of several reasons. They don't want to get a bad name. They don't want their posting to be changed. They don't want media scrutiny, so on and so forth. So if we believe that there are religious markers, we make sure that the crime is in the hate crime database. As far as future plans are concerned, our main aim eventually is advocacy. We do want to advocate for two specific things, which are my pet projects. We haven't got there yet because we have a long road to travel. But I would like to advocate for the law, a specific law that defines religious persecution against Hindus, because Hindus are a global minority. I don't like taking the argument that Hindus are a global minority, but I'm hard pressed to find precedent that has specific religious protection for majority community of a country. So the best argument that we can come up with is, as a global minority and as a community with a long history of persecution, there should be a law protecting Hindus against specific religious persecution and persecution against their faith and symbols of worship. And the other, of course, is a law of return for Hindus, much like the one that Jews have, where if you're a Hindu on your mother's side, you have the right to return to India, because India is a civilization Hindu state and a natural home for Hindus. This is the kind of advocacy that I would like to do in the future. Of course, there are other questions. This is just a half an hour session, so I wouldn't like to get into it, but Ram versus Islam is an eternal question, right? Do we want a right that gives us an equal right? Or do we want a law that gives us an equal right to criticize Ram and to criticize Islam? Or do we want something different? For me, I don't draw that equivalence. There are certain religions and there are certain doctrines that rightfully need to be called out, because they believe that their faith is the ultimate faith, their truth is the ultimate truth, their God is the ultimate God, and nothing exists beyond that. And in the words of Christopher Hitchens, that is immediate temptation to violence. It is unconscionable that somebody would want to end up with Sharia. I don't place Lord Ram, our faith, our culture, even the Manusmriti, at par with any of these cults and any of these faiths, monotheistic faiths that rightfully deserve criticism. So I do believe that there should be a law that protects Hindus and that protects the indigenous religion and culture of India against predatory faiths like Islam and Christianity. And I don't believe that the criticism should be equivalent, that if we get to criticize Ram, we should get to criticize Islam and vice versa. That if we get to burn the Manusmriti, we should get to burn the Quran. I don't want to I don't think there should be a law that ordains or allows the burning of Manusmriti at all. Whether there should be a law protecting a ex-Muslim who wants to burn the Quran, sure. I don't mind it. I don't care about it. I don't think we need to go burning any religious doctrine, however insidious it may be. But should there be protection for ex-Muslims? Yes. Should there be protection for somebody who wants to burn the Manusmriti? No. And I think that's the religious parity that most countries work on. And that's exactly what we should be following as well. We should follow the Israel model as far as protection of indigenous culture and faith of India is concerned. Rahulji very aptly asked that would we still be Bharat if we became 80% Islamic? I would go as far as to say that we are patriots and we are nationalists only till India has a Hindu consciousness. Otherwise, we would be hanging from planes and escaping India like the Afghan Muslims tried. So, India is a Hindu consciousness. India is a natural home for Hindus, and the persecution against Hindus should specifically be dealt by law in the tragic absence of any kind of Hindu street power that we wield. So that would be all. Thank you, Rahulji, for giving me the opportunity to explain the project.
Thank you, Nupur. There are a few questions. We'll just take that. I did want to make a comment. I don't want to mention who, but somebody who had approached Nupurji and Rahulji earlier, and Nupur, I haven't spoken to you about this either. They were trying to build an alternate platform of the same kind. When I looked at the platform, it was basically an aggregation of tweets collected from Voice of Bangladeshi Hindus and n number of Twitter handles. I tried to argue with this gentleman that this is a waste of time and effort to no avail, honestly. The reason I'm bringing this up is that we Hindus end up wasting way too much time, effort, and money in trying to do our own thing and without sort of just being too attached to our own idea of doing something better. An aggregation of tweets is not an academic exercise which can stand any ground in any international or even Indian community anywhere in the world, including in India, like I said. So, in terms of whether this is serious reporting or no, we need serious journalism. This is what Nupur is doing, is the only real platform for real journalism, and so that is why we need to back it. We Hindus are not building institutions. We are not putting our energy and money and effort in building institutions. Here, Rahul Roshan and Nupur Sharma are building Op India, and now with Gavishti, they're building Hinduphobia Tracker. These are institutions they're building. We need to back and build institutions. So just wanted to get that message out. Sorry, we'll take questions.
नमस्ते नुपुर जी, नमस्ते राहुल जी। मेरा प्रश्न आप दोनों से है। पहले मैं नुपुर जी से बात करना चाहूंगी। नुपुर जी, जैसे मैं दैनिक भास्कर प्रतिदिन पढ़ती हूँ, तो मैं देखती हूँ कि वहाँ पे बहुत सारे आते हैं। जैसे आज ही आया कि एक वीडियो गेम खेल रही थी लड़की, वो वीडियो गेम खेलते-खेलते वो उसे बम्बई ले गया, जबलपुर से, और फिर वहाँ लड़की को फ़ोन पे पता चला कि अच्छा ये मुझे दुबई भेजने वाला है, और वो जो ले जाने वाला था वो तनवीर था, और वो वीडियो गेम खेल रहा था उससे पूजा नाम से। तो मुझे तो ये देख के वही लगता है कि ये तो सीधा-सीधा जिहाद ही है। तो क्या ऐसे सारे जो आर्टिकल्स हैं मैं उस आपके हिंदू ट्रैकर में पोस्ट कर सकती हूँ?
थैंक यू वर्षा जी। हाँ, ये बिल्कुल ये तो जिहादी मोडस ऑपरेंडाई है। अब बस समझाने के लिए, जैसे इसमें आपने बताया कि वो नाम बदल कर, मतलब वो मुसलमान था लेकिन हिंदू के नाम से ब्रेन वॉश करने की कोशिश कर रहा था। जब
पहले पूजा बना, फिर बाद में पता चल गया कि तनवीर है।
हाँ, तो जैसे ही नाम बदलते हैं उसको हम हिंदूफोबिया ट्रैकर में ज़रूर डॉक्यूमेंट करते हैं, क्योंकि अगर आप अपने मुसलमान आइडेंटिटी को छुपाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, दैट मीन्स कि आपका एम विक्टिम चॉइस आपका धर्म के आधार पर ही है, वरना आप नाम चेंज नहीं करते। आप हिंदू बन के फेथ जगाना चाहते हैं अपने विक्टिम पे, ताकि आप उसको ब्रेन वॉश कर सके। ऐसे केसेस हम हिंदूफोबिया ट्रैकर में डॉक्यूमेंट करते हैं। मैं मे बी बाय द एंड ऑफ इट मैं ईमेल एड्रेस दे दूंगी। ये वेबसाइट पे ही एक ऑप्शन है कि आप केस को सबमिट कर सकते हैं हिंदूफोबिया ट्रैकर में, तो आप प्लीज सबमिट करिए, हमारी टीम उसको वेट करेगी और फिर हिंदूफोबिया में ऐड करेगी।
ओके, मैं ऐसे डेली देखती हूँ, आप सही बोल रही हैं। दैनिक भास्कर तो मतलब मैं रोज देखती हूँ कि भरे रहते हैं, ऐसी मिशनरीज का है। और एक विश्ववाणी करके वेबसाइट, आपने देखा उसे?
जी, मैंने देखा है।
हाँ, उसमें तो ये लोग डेली बताते हैं, मैगजीन ही पब्लिश करते हैं कि हमने आज कितने क्रिश्चियंस को कन्वर्ट किया, कितने कन्वर्ट किए हैं।
बट अगेन उस कन्वर्जन में एक प्रश्न उठ जाता है कि हमें एविडेंस चाहिए कि वो कन्वर्जन कोअर्जन, इंड्यूसमेंट, अल्योरमेंट, हैरेसमेंट से हुआ है। अगर कोई अपने स्वेच्छा से कन्वर्ट कर रहा है इनटू क्रिश्चियनिटी, तो हम उसको हिंदू फोबिया का नाम नहीं दे पाएंगे, क्योंकि वो ऑथेंटिक नहीं रहता केस फिर। जैसे
हाँ, ये जैसे
पैसे देके कन्वर्जन है, या बोल रहे हैं कि अगर आप जीसस अपना लेंगे तो आपके कोई हेल्थ इशू है वो ठीक हो जाएगा, आपके पास पैसे आ जाएंगे, उस तरह का अगर इंड्यूसमेंट है देन इट्स अ हिंदूफोबिक क्राइम।
ऐसे तो मैं खुद ही जानती हूँ मिशनरीज को जो मेरे आस पड़ोस में रहते हैं, और मैं कुछ नहीं कर
पर
पाती
आप
हूँ।
एविडेंस कलेक्ट करके हमें जरूर भेजिए एंड वील 100% टेक अ लुक एट इट।
So Aarti ji ka question hai, the main issue is exponential population growth, minimum 4-5 children, 4-5 wives. Okay, so population is a global problem. There is a collapse of in TFR, total fertility rate globally, and yes, Muslim populations have a, especially in India and a few regions, have a high. But I mean, this is we can't do much about it. We'll have to have solutions. Thank you for correcting epigraphia indica. It's epigraphia indica. And then you've asked that have you tried to reach big business people, rich people for bigger donations? Yes, absolutely. This is what I do on a weekly basis. Me and my team, Neeraj Dangwal is here. That's all we do. We are full time into this every day. Shrikant ji.
Hello. Yeah. So I mean, there are also a lot of non-crimes which are also Hindu phobia, right? For example, the denial of a Hindu phobic crime as actually Hindu phobic, like you mentioned, by the police authorities.
Shrikant ji,
I mean-
that we have a subcategory for it. Denial of large-scale persecution or denial of persecution of Hindus. That is there. That is a subcategory in it of itself. So if somebody says that the Malabar genocide of Hindus happened, it was a peasant uprising, we would document it as denial of large-scale persecution.
Yeah, about this Pahalgam, you have not put it on the, I think, the tracker. I guess that's because it's, I think even Christians were among the victims, right?
No. I'm saying we have added Pahalgam and we've only added. Yeah.
रमेश कार्निक जी, आप पूछ सकते हैं सर प्रश्न।
Namaskar, everybody. Thank you, Nupur ji, for an excellent presentation. My question is very simple. Your efforts, that is, Hindu phobia, definition, and then taking it to the people, and all creating the Hindu Fund, vis-a-vis the recent interaction of Param Pujani Sarsanga Chalak of RSS with All India Ulema Council members, about 60 of them. In my view, it becomes a huge cover fire for those people. So how do you see this how do you tackle this internal problem in your effort? This is my concern and question.
Sir, as far as I'm concerned, I'm too small to tackle these problems. I don't consider myself, it's way above my pay grade, frankly. In my opinion, politicians politic, that's their job. We just need to do our job. And I think the only reason why any politician would be meeting the ulema and would not be meeting a group of Hindu seers for political reasons is because we have failed to become a pressure group. I would put the onus back on us, but commenting on why politicians do what politicians do is way above my pay grade. I have no idea, and I don't think I'm ever going to understand. So, and maybe Rahul ji has a better answer.
Rahul's comments?
Don't have comments here at this point. Same thing, same problem.
At least you invite them to your conference. Have you invited Sarsanga Chalak to listen to you?
Well, I don't know if we have to keep going back to RSS to solve our problems. Actually, that's actually one of the biggest impediments I run into. When I ask for donations, one of the objections I run into is people saying, "Oh, ये तो RSS का काम है, तुम क्यों कर रहे हो?" Well, मैं इसलिए कर रहा हूँ because RSS has not solved that problem. So, unfortunately. So, anyways, I mean, let RSS do what they're doing. Calling them or no is engaging with RSS or the government. Absolutely, we keep doing, sir. But whenever the opportunity happens, but I mean, we just have to keep moving forward with what we have at hand. I don't know if that answers your question, Ramesh sir, but that's all I have to say to this.
Thank you. I understand. Thank you.
नरहरि जी।
Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much, Rahul and Nupur ji, for all the amazing work you've been doing. Very quick, shameless plug-in as well as a very serious question. I'm the founder of Rhythm Studios, which we recently started. It's a platform for dharmic storytelling. So we help creators. We use our own IKS network, scholars who help us create authentic Indic narratives, which go out to the youngsters in the format which they understand. Just keeping that aside, as a part of the initiatives, we want to seriously build a very authentic Hindu Holocaust virtual reality experience. And I've been trying to get in touch with people who can really help me with the authentic data. We want to build it across all the different ages, the Holocaust that has happened, from Kashmir to Kerala to Bengal to Gujarat to at whichever timelines. So I'm just trying to understand here what could be a source of compilation that I could use, so that I can maintain that authenticity, and we can provide that experience which really our youngsters, especially Hindu youngsters, young kids and youth, they need to have this experience. So just want to ask this, since Nupur brought up the Israel Holocaust.
Thank you for the effort, first and foremost. Secondly, there is no source right now. We'll just have to do the legwork ourselves. There is no consolidated source that gives you names and pictures of victims. You'll just have to go year by year, day by day, month by month, and try and find the information. Someday, in a few years, Hinduphobia Tracker could be that consolidated information bank. So far,
Right.
we have.
Understood. At least in terms of that experience that we would want to deliver, we need certain experts to help us or guide us in the way it has to be taken forward in terms of the designs and all the experiences, etc. So if you could point out to any research.
Sure. I mean, basically, just get started. Just get started with something. There is enough Hindu genocide. Just get started with Kashmir, for example. The stories from
Right.
Kashmir, right? Or
Got it.
as recent as Murshidabad. I could put you in touch with some people in Bengal. You could just get started there. See, instead of waiting for a perfect solution, get started with what is good enough, and things that nature works, things evolve. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Parna Vikramji, I'm unable to raise my hand. Is this only, it's for Nupur, is this only an academic exercise, or is there a larger outreach plan with CTA for Hindus? I'm specifically interested to know if your organization has a political outreach program to become a potential pressure group so Hindus become a formidable vote bank. Nupurji.
Oh, for me, I don't have any plan as such. We are just starting off. But yes, advocacy is one of the big areas that we want to foray into. What shape that would take, reaching out to be a political pressure group, I'm not very sure. But reaching out to be a pressure group where we demand and advocate for laws to protect Hindus, certainly. I think the only thing we can really do is get a lot of people talking about the laws that we require. And once it reaches critical mass and once it reaches critical volume, the politicians hear us themselves. So the aim is to get there. I'm sorry, I will not be able to provide you with a timeline because it's work that has to happen incrementally over the years.
We'll go to Ashwinji.
Yeah, great initiative with with the Hindu Fund. I just had a question for maybe reflection, right? So a lot of what has been going on in India, right, with all the inroads that missionaries and others have made, was largely because I think most of the Hindu population, including myself, were kind of unaware of what was going on, right? It was done by stealth, I think, as Nupurji mentioned. So, I mean, do you think it would be more potent if what we're trying to do would be done by word of mouth, right, as opposed to getting a lot of visibility? Because what that does is it gives others time to prepare, and I think they're probably better prepared because they've been doing this for decades. So does doing it by stealth have do you think it would have like more impact?
So firstly, I come from the tech world, from the open source world. I ran a software business, like I'd said during my introduction. And one of the arguments against that proprietary systems, or Microsoft, for example, made against Linux was that, the source code is open. So our argument from the open source side was that security by obscurity is not really security, right? So that argument does not hold, that we should this is exactly the Hindu organization's argument for doing Ghar Wapsi, for example. Oh, we will not talk about it. Actually, the other way around. They enter our temples and go around telling people, and they get away with it in a court. They should bloody be whacked and thrown out. And we are talking about that, maybe we need to just hide our work and keep doing our work silently. All this does not work. Actually, we need to have Hindu helplines, Ghar Wapsi helplines. The VHP has recently set up a Hindu helpline to aid love jihad victims. This is defensive strategy. If you look at my talk on Sangam Talks, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We need to get out of being victims and our siege mentality and our crying victim all the time. We have to start being offensive. We have to bat on the front foot. We should be opening helplines, 1-800 helplines in every damn city in India, that here is our helpline. Should you want to convert to Hinduism, please. Here are two people, here is an organization, here is a lawyer team. We are setting it all up. Please come, we'll tell you how to convert. We need to be running Google ads on doing this. And okay, we have to be openly expansionist. This mindset has to completely change. I don't know, Prasanji, if you're there. Nidish, coming over to you.
नमस्ते राहुल जी, नमस्ते नुपुर जी, और बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। मेरा मैं अभी एक जो प्रश्न आपसे और एक सुझाव भी चाहता हूँ। मैं अभी एक पोस्ट कुछ दिन से पढ़ रहा था रिगार्डिंग ड्राइविंग जिहाद, बिकॉज हम लोग बहुत सारी चीजों के बारे में बात करते हैं, लेकिन इसके बारे में थोड़ा स्किप हुआ है कई बार, बिकॉज अभी पिछले कुछ समय से जो पोस्ट में पढ़ रहा था उसमें ये पॉइंट्स आ रहे थे कि पिछले 6 महीने में लगभग ऐसी बहुत सारी वारदात, ऐसी बहुत सारी घटनाएं पहाड़ों में हुई हैं जहां पर 90% या उससे ज्यादा जो वहां चालक है वो मुस्लिम थे, और वो कूद करके अपनी जान बचा लेते हैं, घायल हो जाते हैं। और वहां पर जितनी सवारियां होती है उनके पास 1000 फीट खाई में गिर जाती है। तो ये भी एक अलग तरीके की चीज है जिस पर लगभग मैंने अब तक ये टर्म सुना नहीं था। पिछले कुछ दिन से मैं ये टर्म सुन रहा हूँ, तो अगर इसके बारे में भी कोई फैक्ट चेकिंग हुई है तो प्लीज। एंड द अदर थिंग इज लाइक एक बुक मैं अभी पढ़ रहा था ऑफ भगिनी निवेदिता, दैट इज एग्रेसिव हिंदुइज्म, ज्वलंत हिंदुत्व, 100 साल पुरानी किताब है। और इस बुक में जो एग्रेसिव की निश्चित बात अभी अभी राहुल जी ने की रिगार्डिंग घर वापसी कि हमें वो करना पड़ेगा, मुझे लगता है भगिनी निवेदिता ने 100 साल पहले यही चीज कही थी और हम इस चीज को अब तक अप्लाई नहीं कर पाए बिकॉज ऑफ द डिफेंसिव स्ट्रैटेजी। तो जब तक हम लोग इस पॉइंट को सेम वे में जो राहुल जी कहना चाह रहे हैं लगातार, उन्होंने समूह टॉक्स में कहा, जम्मू टॉक्स में भी कहा था, तब तक मुझे नहीं लगता। और बहुत पतली सी किताब है। और अभी 2 दिन पहले मैं भोपाल था, वहां पर माखनलाल चतुर्वेदी यूनिवर्सिटी के बीसी से मेरी बात हुई, तो उन्होंने एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट बताया कि औरंगजेब ने 50 साल में जितना नरसंहार नहीं किया, अलाउद्दीन खिलजी ने 20 साल में उससे ज्यादा कर दिया था। तो हम उस तरह की पॉइंट को भी नहीं जानते हैं, तो तब हमें करना पड़ेगा।
क्वेश्चन क्या है?
नहीं, मैं जो ड्राइविंग जिहाद की बात कर रहा था कि ये जो मतलब पोस्ट मैंने पढ़े, मेरे पास में उसके साथ तक नहीं है, मैं उसका वीडियो बनाना।
I'll answer. I think we will diminish our calls if we go into too many directions without evidence. हमारे पास कई बार कई टाइम से 2-3 महीने के लिए कॉल आ रहा था कि मुस्लिम्स आर इंडल्जिंग इन हॉर्न जिहाद, हॉन्किंग, कि वो हिंदुओं के घर के सामने जाके दे आर गोइंग ऑन हॉन्किंग टू बॉदर देम। I mean, they can, वो कर सकते हैं honk, unless we have evidence that it is religiously motivated and they are doing it specifically for religious reasons. To term it horn jihad, we diminish our own seriousness because we can't equate it with everything else that's happening. It doesn't meet the same standard of evidence and seriousness. And I suspect this genre that you're talking about, ये मुझे वैसा ही लगता है। Yes, I mean, you can argue कि ISIS also indulges in, ramming cars in populated sort of gatherings, and it's one of the methods by which they attack kafirs. But unless all of these cases have that evidence कि कोई अल्लाह अकबर स्क्रीम करके कार रैम कर रहा है या रिलीजियस इवेंट पे रैम कर रहा है, or whatever, there could be like a million markers. We need some marker to prove that it has religious motivations. Otherwise, we will end up only diminishing ourselves in our own argument. And I have no doubt that they must be doing that because that's what their history is, that's what their nature is. But to document it and to really talk about it in all seriousness, we need evidence.
Okay, Karthik ji.
Hi, Nubarji. Thanks for the talk. I had three major questions. Among these 10 categories or 10 or 12 categories, are there some categories that are more impactful or less impactful? And do we have some sort of like a taxonomy for that? And the second question is, through this data collection, I would like to know if, like, maybe in a year or two, we get to study some data patterns, like this is happening in a certain pattern. That would be like a good thing to know. And the third question was just like Rahulji mentioned, that there should be like a helpline. Are you also having some helpline where you can pull such data, where people feed their data directly to you instead of you actively having to pull such data? Are there any such protocols there?
Okay, great three questions. The category that is least impactful is frankly hate speech. It is least impactful because even internationally, hate speech is less sort of taken seriously. The paradox I'd like to point out here is any other database और ये जितने भी Christians या Muslims निकालते हैं कि इतने सारे hate attacks हो गए हमारे ऊपर और हाय तौबा मचा देते हैं 99% उनके hate speech के cases ही रहते हैं और वो अपना डेटा भी पब्लिक नहीं करते. So yes, hate speech is a less impactful category in my personal opinion, which is why we are very skeptical putting things in hate speech to begin with. We don't put hate speech by any ikka dukka Muslim on the road. Internally, we've sort of made up our mind that if we document a hate speech, it has to be by somebody notable and should have the impact of translating into real life violence. Otherwise, we will not consider it, add it actively into the Hinduphobia tracker. As far as data patterns are concerned, most of our subcategories actually depend on those data patterns. So if we have a lot of cases where a specific thread of hate crime is visible, you would most likely find a corresponding subcategory for that thread of violence. For example, forcefully making a girl wear the burqa. It is a very repetitive pattern that we've observed of force feeding beef in cases of religious violence after they get into a relationship with Hindu women. That is again a separate subcategory, and one is a tertiary category. So we do have those patterns established. But yes, going forward, we do plan to release research papers that outline those patterns much more effectively. As far as data helpline is concerned, we do have an email and we do have a form where you can submit these cases. A phone helpline we don't have yet, and we don't plan to have, because when you need to submit such details, there are obviously a lot of documents involved, more often than not. So we would stick to a website form for now. Maybe in future we could branch out to a phone helpline. I'm not sure about that yet.
Okay, we are at 10:10. We'll probably take just one or two questions. Andy Gupta ji has been raising his hand.
Yeah, hi. Fantastic content and presentation, and shows the real background work done by Nupurji. There are few suggestions and a little guideline required by you. First, the question is to Rahulji. Rahulji, how can we get some small videos wherein we can show them to the Hindu people who really discussed out or talk about it in various platforms or forums in our local city, so that they are able to understand the gist of it and then they are able to join you? So how we can help you to promote the entire activity? That is number one. And number two, a small suggestion. See, if you what we are fighting with has a huge religious background to it, wherein the entire activities are driven from their religious places, the churches and the masjids. So, a suggestion is until and unless the activities driven by us are some way connected to our religious places, how that can be done needs to be explored. So that might increase the impact of it.
You said, how do you get videos on Sangam Talks? If you go, the entire presentation that I made, a long form presentation of that is right here. So you could actually share this with people. The other thing is that if you organize groups, 50 people groups, for example, in your city, I would be happy to come anywhere in India and make presentations in person for what the purpose and objective of the Hindu Fund is. So hope that helps. And your second question was?
Yes, absolutely. My second question was, the darkness that we are fighting with is run by them from their religious places, churches and masjids. So how we can again inculcate or bring the entire activities, the pivot our mandirs or our religious places, so that the people are more attached to it.
Okay, I mean, that's I don't know how to solve that problem. It's a 100 will take 100 years for us to solve that. But once again, my solution is that if we become missionary, if we start becoming aggressively missionary and start using tit for tat strategies, we will win this battle. Only that, if we can actually, and my solution for that is to put pressure on our dharmacharyas, on Hindu organizations, to openly and publicly announce Ghar Wapsi programs. My belief is, and I've talked about this at length in once again on Sangam Talks, there are talks on Ghar Wapsi and Hindu Rajya, that there'll be crores of Muslims who will want to come back only if we start embracing them. Good. So before we close, Nupur is raising funds for Hindu Phobia Tracker. You could go and donate online on the site. We haven't worked with her recently on any more money that she's raising, but if she is, then we'll put up a campaign on the Hindu Fund website as well. So you could come and specifically donate for that. Each donation, when you make to a campaign, is specifically tracked, and then once we hit the goal, we sort of release it, or actually do intermediate releases as well. That's how we are setting up the process. So it's 10:15. We'll probably not take any more questions, if that's okay. Varshaji, maybe you could write an email to us. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Nupur, for
Thank
the
you so
session.
much.
Yeah, we'll be putting up this video of a presentation on the Hindu Fund website as well. It'll be on the organization page of the Avishti Foundation. And so, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rahulji. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.